Hey guys, time for grammar video number 3. This time we are talking about comma rules. So several of these comma rules are things that we already talked about when we were learning about conjunctions. But I just want to make sure that we really understand when we're supposed to use commas. Because here's the thing, there are some people that really like to use commas, like use way too many commas. So we want to make sure that we're using them at just the right time, and I want to make sure that you can understand why we use commas when we use them. Like if somebody says to you, why am I supposed to put a comma here but not here? I would love for you to be able to explain to that person why. First, let's talk about introductory words or phrases, aka transition words or phrases, aka conjunctive adverbs, which is something we talked about with conjunctions. So an introductory word or phrase, also known as a transition word, is a phrase or a word that comes before an independent clause. When we have one of these, we need to put a comma after it. These also include transitions like first of all, in conclusion, also, next, finally, always a comma afterwards. First of all, I like most animals. For instance, my favorite animal is the sea turtle. That is actually true, by the way. Next, let's talk about interruptions, also aka conjunctive adverbs. When we have a word or a phrase that interrupts one single independent clause, this is an interruption, also known as, again, a conjunctive adverb. So an independent clause would be something like, sea turtles face a lot of adversity. Well, when I interrupt that one single independent clause with a conjunctive adverb, like however, I need to put commas before and after the however. The commas show me that the however isn't really necessary. The sentence is grammatically correct without it. I could still just say, sea turtles face a lot of adversity. But I'm adding in the however to add a little bit of extra information and a little bit of extra emphasis. So again, I need to set that off with a comma before and after. So we have a special type of interruption called an appositive phrase. An appositive phrase is a specific type of interruption that restates or renames the noun that it is referring to. We need to have commas before and after appositive phrases, just like we would regular interruptions. So if I have the sentence, loggerheads make nests on the beaches of Sarasota County, perfectly fine just like that. But say somebody doesn't know what a loggerhead is and I want to clarify that for them, I could add in this appositive phrase. Loggerheads, a species of sea turtle, make nests on the beaches of Sarasota County. Again, I can take this out. It's not necessary, but it is helping to restate or rename this noun, and I need to set it off using commas. When we have an appositive phrase, it's not a conjunctive adverb. A conjunctive adverb would be like a single word, or maybe like 2 or 3, like in the end. But a species of sea turtle is not a conjunctive adverb. It is just an appositive phrase. When we learned about conjunctions, we learned about subordinating conjunctions, which start off subordinate clauses. We're going to go a little bit deeper into that now. We have 2 different types of subordinate clauses. First, we have a non-restrictive subordinate clause. This is a clause that doesn't change or limit the overall meaning of a sentence. When we have a non-restrictive subordinate clause, we need to set it off with commas before and after to show that it is extra information within the sentence that isn't really necessary. Usually, non-restrictive subordinate clauses start with which or who. Obviously, there are times when that's not going to be the case, but usually it is. For example, take the sentence, sea turtle hatchlings sometimes become distracted by house lights. That sentence is perfectly fine all by itself. It really doesn't need any more information. But if I want to add some extra info just for fun, a non-restrictive subordinate clause, it might look like this. Sea turtle hatchlings, which are my favorite baby animal, sometimes become distracted by house lights. Now, I am not changing the meaning of the sentence. I am not limiting the meaning of the sentence. I'm just adding some extra info, which is, again, a non-restrictive subordinate clause. It starts with the subordinating conjunction which, and it is set off by commas before and after because it's not actually necessary to my sentence. Our other type of subordinate clause is a restrictive subordinate clause. So if a non-restrictive subordinate clause does not change or limit the meaning of a sentence, a restrictive subordinate clause does change the meaning of a sentence. It's actually necessary information to help us understand what's going on. Restrictive clauses usually start with the word that, and they do not need commas anywhere. For example, sea turtle hatchlings sometimes become distracted by the lights that people have on their houses. Now, grammatically, I could say sea turtle hatchlings sometimes become distracted by the lights. But people might be like, what lights are you talking about, Mrs. Clinch? And I could say, oh, let me add in my restrictive clause here, lights that people have on their houses. So my subordinate clause is that people have on their houses. Could be a sentence by itself, but it adds meaning to the rest of this sentence, and therefore I don't need commas anywhere. Sea turtle hatchlings sometimes become distracted by the lights that people have on their houses. The last thing we're going to talk about today is compound versus complex sentences. So in a compound sentence, you have two independent clauses, which are two clauses, two groups of words that could be sentences all by themselves, two complete thoughts. When you join them with a coordinating conjunction, one of our fanboys, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so, you should put a comma before the conjunction. Remember, never, ever, ever commas after coordinating conjunctions, always before. For example, I have, sea turtle hatchlings become distracted by house lights. That is an independent clause. Could be a sentence all by itself. I also have, they crawl away from the water. That could also be a sentence all by itself. So I have my two independent clauses. Now I want to join them using the coordinating conjunction and when I do, I need a comma to separate them, showing that they are two independent clauses. Sea turtle hatchlings become distracted by house lights and they crawl away from the water. Now in a complex sentence, if the sentence begins with a subordinate clause, you should put a comma at the end of the whole clause, not just at the end of the subordinating conjunction. So you're putting a comma between the subordinate clause and the independent clause at the end of the sentence. When people leave their house lights on during turtle season, comma, sea turtle hatchlings become distracted and crawl away from the water. So I have my subordinating conjunction, when, that starts off my subordinate clause. When people leave their house lights on during turtle season. That cannot be a sentence by itself. It's not an independent clause. It's a subordinate clause. I need to put a comma after it to connect it to my independent clause. Sea turtle hatchlings become distracted and crawl away from the water. So I need to put my comma there to connect these two. Notice that I have a coordinating conjunction right here and I don't have a comma. That's because the clause that follows that coordinating conjunction is not an independent clause. I can't just say, crawl away from the water when I'm talking about the sea turtles. So I don't put a comma there because this is not an independent clause. Well, that's it for comma rules. If you have any questions or comments, make sure to put them down below. Promise I'll get back to you. And I will see you all in class on Friday. Is that even worse than last week?